Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. This is the third in the series on buying or acquiring your very first home. And we want to talk today about wants and needs. You may recall that last time we talked about the qualifying process, and we saw there's three components to the qualifying process. There's what you can afford, there's what you want, and what meets your needs. And we've pretty much covered this. We started out talking about the down payment, how much cash you need up front to be able to acquire it, the down payment that would be up to the mortgage, and also the acquisition costs like legal fees, like land transfer tax. We saw that there's some benefit available to first-time buyers by way of rebate for land transfer tax. And we talked about how you can tighten your belt and what you can do to save that very important down payment. Then we talked about applying for a mortgage, qualifying for a mortgage, and what you qualify for, and the criteria the bank or lending institution uses based on how much you earn, how much you owe, and what your credit score is. Once we've accomplished that, you should have a pretty good idea of the price range of the property you're looking for. And that's important. You need to know what to head for. Once you do that, now it's a matter of finding that dream home, finding that right property, the one that meets your needs and satisfies your wants. And so you're going to have to decide what type of property do you want. All kinds of properties. You can go with a single family home, you can go with a condo. A condo can be a townhouse or an apartment. You can go with a semi-detached, you can go with country property, you can go with multifamily. And let me take a second and talk to you about multifamily. One of the things I encourage, not always, but I encourage young people to think about when they're buying their first house is consider buying a house that's got a secondary or maybe 3 apartments in it. Live in one, enjoy the rent from the others to supplement your mortgage payment, and it'll give you more equity to be able to save for a subsequent property or to ease your whole financial strain because you're getting that help. Bear in mind that you're not buying your forever house. You're buying the house what you want as a starting point. Then, not too far along, you'll have built up equity as you pay down the mortgage, as the property goes up in value. You can take some equity out of that property, go on, move to a single family home, and keep that property as your first investment property. Makes a lot of sense. You want to talk about style. Do you want a bungalow? Do you want a split level? Back split, side split, tri-level? Do you want a 2-story? Do you want a raised ranch? What type of property do you want to start with? And then we want to talk about location. I'm thinking, for example, do you want St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, Welland? Do you want it in the country, in a rural setting? What do you specifically want? And I want to encourage you 2 things with location. They say the 3 most important criteria when it comes to value of a property is location, location, location. We talked the other day about the fact that property in Toronto is worth a lot more than property, for example, maybe in Sault Ste. Marie, because it's close to a major metropolitan area. So location makes a big difference. When you buy your property, always think resale. I always find people when they're buying a property think, well, I'm going to spend the rest of my life here. And that happens sometime. I read the other day about a couple who, he just died last year at 103 years old, and they were living in the house that they bought in the early 40s just after they got married. But that's rare. 70% of people who buy a house and put a mortgage on for 5 years break that mortgage within the first 5 years. So it isn't always forever. And you want to think about resale when you buy a house. When you're thinking about location, if you have 2 choices, you can buy a really stellar property in a very marginal area. Maybe it's a lot of industrial, or maybe it's deteriorating houses in the neighborhood. Or you can buy a mediocre type house and need some loving care in a wonderful neighborhood. Go with the great neighborhood and the house that you can fix up. It'll appreciate in value, whereas the other one probably won't. So decide where. Do you want to be near schools? Do you want to be out some open field where you've got some room to breathe? What do you want? And then we also now need to look at features, and we'll start with what you need. Now, the list of what you need isn't that large. You may think it is, but it really isn't when you put pen to paper and start writing it down. If you're an elderly couple, your knees are bad maybe, you need a bungalow. You can't afford to have stairs going up and down. If you are handicapped to a certain degree, you may need some kind of access that can get you in and out on a ramp instead of stairs, or the availability to add that. So that becomes important. If you have 3 children, you're going to need at least a 3-bedroom home. A 2-bedroom is not going to be large enough. So there are certain things you just absolutely flat out need. But now you go to your wants and you write down all the things that you just want in a house. And you can just go on and on and on. But I want to tell you that it isn't necessarily what you're going to end up with. I started my real estate career in the Ottawa Valley, in a town right on the Ontario-Quebec border, and I had a lot of people from Montreal looking at relocating to Ontario. And it's as though they all took the same class or watched the same video. They all came in. When I first met them, they would say, I want a 100-acre farm. It's got to have at least 15 acres of mature bush, because 15 acres is the minimum amount where you can weed out the dying trees and never use up the bush, and you can heat your home. I want a hillside with a southern exposure, and it's got to have a stream so I can harness for hydroelectric power. Well, guess what? They mostly didn't end up with that exact package. In fact, if they were looking for that, and that was 40 years ago, they'd still be looking. What you had to do is do some trade-offs. You say, well, maybe instead of harnessing hydroelectric power, I'll look at putting some solar panels up. Maybe instead of heating my home with wood, I'll put geothermal in the ground. There's some things you can do as trade-offs. The thing is to find the home that speaks to you. The home that, it's like falling in love. You can have a list of all the things you want in the Mr. or Mrs. Right, but when you meet that person, throw the list out the window. All of a sudden, the person makes your heart go pitter-patter, and you just know this is the right person. It's exactly the same it is with finding a house. You want to find the house that just talks to you. It just says, this is what I want. So this is absolutely mandatory, and this is a starting point. Take the list and look at it and aim for it, but understand that what you end up with might be quite different. And we're going to talk next week about getting the rubber on the road and getting out and looking, and how to actually find that perfect house.